Hello everyone and welcome back to the channel and the brand new video. Guys, on 2nd April 2022, President Donald Trump stood at the podium just over 2 months into his second term and declared something that immediately sent shockwaves through the economic world. He called it Liberation Day in America. It wasn't just a fiery speech or a bold slogan. It came with a monumental policy shift that could redefine global trade as we know it. In front of a packed room, Trump announced a new doctrine for the US economy, which is reciprocal tariffs, backed by a 10% universal import tax on every product entering American shores. For decades, America has operated on the idea that free trade would benefit everyone. But now, Trump says it's time to flip the script. In this video, we will break down the 7 biggest takeaways from this historic announcement. What does it mean for the global partners like China and India? How will the US economy react to this? And what are the early signs of impact? So, guys, let's dive into it one by one. So, first takeaway is the 10% universal tariff is now law. The first and most straightforward part of the term's new policy is the 10% universal tariff. This means that starting April 5th, every single product imported into the United States will face a flat 10% tax. No exceptions, no specialties, no loopholes. Trump explained this measure as a way to make foreign companies pay for what he called decades of one sided trade abuse. He argued that America has opened its market to the world, allowing goods to flood in tariff free, while other countries slapped US products with taxes, regulations, and red tape. This new tariff is being sold to the American public as a source of massive revenue. The administration projects trillions of dollars could flow into federal coffers over the next 10 years just from this baseline policy alone. But the real heat came from what Trump said next. The universal tariff is just the floor. For many countries, the calling is much higher. So that brings us to the second takeaway. Reciprocal tariffs target worst offenders. In addition to the flat 10%, Trump announced a second layer, reciprocal tariffs. These are the targeted tax imposed on countries that, according to the White House, have been exploiting the US market by levying unfair tariffs, VAT systems, and behind the scenes barriers against the American exports. So, here is how it works. The administration conducted what they call a full audit of trade practices around the world. Every country's tariffs and trade restrictions were reviewed. Then, using what Trump described as a kind model of reciprocity, the US is now imposing half of each country's average barriers back onto their imports. That means if a country imposes a 60% effective barrier on US goods, the US will now impose 30% in return on top of the 10% universal tariff. The numbers are staggering. China will face a 34% reciprocal tariff, and India also 34%. Vietnam 46, Colombia 49. Key allies like South Korea and Japan face 25% and 24% respectively. Trump was unapologetic. He said, "If you tax us, we will tax you. If you keep us out, we will pay you more to get in." And for the first time, this kind of aggressive reciprocity isn't just being threatened, it's being implemented, effective immediately. So, the next takeaway is China is the main target here. Out of all of the nations impacted by this policy, one stands out more than any other, which is China. The new tariffs on China goods total 34%, which, when added to the 10% universal tariff, brings the total cost for Chinese imports to a massive 54%. This is the most severe penalty issued under the policy. Trump directly called out China in his announcement. He accused them of manipulating their currency, stealing American intellectual property, and playing a major role in the financial crisis devastating American communities. He also pointed fingers at so called transshipment schemes where Chinese goods are relabeled and routed through Vietnam or Cambodia to dodge existing tariffs. In Trump's words, the American people have paid the price that comes to end now. This marks a serious escalation in the ongoing US China trade conflict. While Beijing hasn't yet responded with the official countermeasures, there is no doubt the message was received and retaliation is likely possible. So, next takeaway is Canada and Mexico are left out for now. So, one surprise in the announcement was the absence of America's two biggest neighbors, Canada and Mexico. So, what do you think on this? Neither country was included in the reciprocal tariff list, but that's now because they are off the hook. In fact, they are already under a different set of tariffs that were implemented by Trump weeks earlier under a national emergency declaration linked to border security and financial trafficking. So, while Canada and Mexico are not facing the new 10% universal tariff or the reciprocal add ons, they are still tangled in trade tensions with the Washington. Their exemptions are temporary. The administration clarified that previous carve outs from the USMCA trade deal, especially for automobiles and energy, are set to expire, and there are no signs that these exceptions will be renewed. Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney reacted strongly, calling this a fundamental shift in how global trade will be managed going forward. Also, tensions in North America are rising, and it seems it's only a matter of time before the neighbors to the north and south face new pressure. So, guys, our next takeaway is Trump's justification. America has been pillaged. So, throughout the speech, Trump painted a picture of country that had been looted, pillaged, raped, and plundered. These were the words of President. That was his language, not softened, not filtered. He pointed to over $19 trillion in trade deficits accumulated over the last several decades. He cited the loss of more than 5 million manufacturing jobs and the hollowing out of once thriving industrial towns across the Midwest. So he also highlighted the record-breaking $1.2 trillion trade deficit in 2024 as a final straw proof, in his view that the free trade era has failed America. According to Trump, this isn't just about trade policy, it's about the national dignity. He claimed that the American worker has been laughed at, ignored, and abandoned by the global elite. The tariffs, he said, are not just about raising revenue, they are about the respect and about reclaiming fairness and about making the world play by the same rules the US has for years. So, next takeaway is tariffs are just one piece of a bigger plan. So, what's behind that? While tariffs stole the headlines, the administration made it clear this is just one part of much broader economic strategy. Trump's team is rolling out a new wave of policies aimed at accelerating American manufacturing. These include major corporate tax cuts, deep deregulation in energy and transportation, and a newly created Commerce Department unit that will fast track billion-dollar domestic projects. So, the ultimate goal of this is to offset potential price increase from tariffs by boosting domestic production and new jobs creation. Supporters argued that this multi pronged strategy could bring manufacturing back to the US, increase wages, and reduce dependence on the foreign supply chains. While critics, however, warn of inflation, supply shocks, and retaliation from global trading partners. But either way, one thing is certain this policy rollouts is bigger than just the tariffs. It's a complete rethinking of America's role in the global economy. And guys, and the last takeaway in our list is early reactions and market jitters. The markets have already started to react and not in a good way. So within 24 hours of the announcement, the S&P 500 dropped 4.6% while the Nasdaq fell nearly 10%. Also, tech companies and multinationals with global supply chains were hit especially hard. So, investment banks like Goldman Sachs quickly revised their forecast, increasing the probability of a near term recession from 20% to 35%. But not everyone is hitting the panic button. Some economists argue that the US economy is resilient. Exports only make up around 11% of GDP, while imports are around 40%. So that means there is room for the domestic economy to absorb some shock, especially if consumer spending and job growth remain strong. Ultimately, the real test will begin in the numbers. Will US factories reopen? Will wages go up? Or will prices spike and trade wars spiral out of control? Only time will tell, but the shakes have near been higher. So, guys, those were the seven major takeaways from one of the most dramatic trade announcements in modern US history. This isn't just about the tariffs, it's about reshaping America's relationship with the world, redefining how trade is done, and reviving the idea of economic nationalism on a global stage. Whether you support it or oppose it, one thing is undeniable. Trump's reciprocal tariff rollout is already reshaping the rules of the game. So, what do you think on this? Will this move finally level the American playing field for American workers, or is it a dangerous step towards global economic instability? Drop your thoughts in the comments and also like this video if you found it informative. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel and hit that bell icon so you never miss our deep dive on politics, global economics, and current affairs. And thank you so much for watching. And until next time, stay sharp, stay informed, and I will see you in the next one.